The sound started somewhere around 0600 and didn't stop. It sliced through the camp's morning haze like a sonic blade, vibrating every unbrushed molar and short-circuiting at least 3 surveillance drones. Some blamed a faulty sensor in the atmospheric scrubbers. Others said it was an incoming alarm. But no, this was biological. Alive, furious, and very, very small. By 0630, the command tent had become a war zone of sound. Tactical readouts flickered erratically. 2 officers had dropped their mugs mid-sip, and a communication officer had barricaded herself under the table, muttering something about auditory invasion protocols. Near the center, encircled by a semi-crickle of terrified soldiers and curious Vayari warriors, stood a blue-skinned alien woman with braided hair, stiff as armor plating, and an expression that hadn't changed in 10 minutes. She held the source of the chaos in her arms, a swaddled, screaming infant whose tiny lungs seemed engineered by an angry god of acoustics. Corporal Elias Rowe, meanwhile, was trying to chew a nutrition bar in peace behind the mess tent. He wasn't scheduled for anything until noon and had perfected the art of pretending to look busy while doing absolutely nothing, a highly underrated skill in any interspecies conflict. He bit off a piece, chewed thoughtfully, and stared out at the gathering storm of personnel around the shrieking child. "What now?" he muttered, brushing protein crumbs off his standard-issue jacket. Then he caught sight of the baby's mother, tall, armored, looking like she'd bench-pressed tanks for breakfast, and the muscle between his eyebrows twitched. She didn't look like she needed help. She looked like she was the help people usually called for. And yet there she stood, still as a statue, surrounded by increasingly desperate officers holding scanners, nutrient gels, and was that a rubber chicken? Curiosity did it. That and the fact that no one else had dared to move closer in 20 minutes. Elias sighed, pocketed the rest of his bar, and ambled toward the chaos. "I wouldn't," someone muttered as he passed. Probably Private Renshaw, the guy who fainted when his ration pack hissed at him. Elias stopped 3 feet from the alien woman, glanced at the baby, and tilted his head. The infant took a deep breath, preparing to launch the next auditory missile. "Hey," Elias said, "ever try humming?" The mother didn't answer. Her pupils, slit like a predator's, narrowed. The baby shrieked again. "Right. Rough crowd." Without waiting for permission or any semblance of logic, Elias knelt, leaned forward, and gently reached for the child. A ripple of gas circled the crowd like a slow explosion. Siraka didn't move, but her fingers tightened around the child like a docking clamp. Her voice crackled with layered tones. "What are you doing, human?" Elias grinned. "Gonna try something real advanced. Ancient Earth technique. Passed down from generation to generation. It's called padding." She stared. He reached out, then stopped. "Okay, new plan. I sit here. You do nothing." She screams. Everyone slowly loses their minds. Or, you let me hold her for just 10 seconds. If I fail, you can glare me into atoms. The baby took another breath. Siraka hesitated. Then with the slowness of a malfunctioning cargo arm, she handed the child over. Elias adjusted the weight in his arms. The infant's skin was a faint bluish purple, warm and soft and absolutely furious. He bounced her once, lightly. Then he hummed. It wasn't much, just a clumsy tune from a cartoon theme song buried deep in childhood memory. The baby blinked. The next shriek hiccuped. Then silence, just silence, weightless, astonishing. The camp held its breath. "She likes Captain Nutbar and the Space Squirrels," Elias whispered. "Tasteful?" Siraka stared at him like he'd just grown a second head and offered to braid hers. The baby yawned, then nestled into Elias's jacket, tiny fists curling into the fabric like she'd decided this lumpy creature might be tolerable. A Vayari warrior in the back dropped his stun pike in shock. Elias looked up, face unreadable. "So, do I get hazard pay for this? Or at least another protein bar?" No one answered. Somewhere in the distance, a drone that had been malfunctioning for weeks rebooted itself and flew off in a straight line for the first time in days. Siraka lowered herself beside him slowly, one armored knee touching the ground. "What are you?" Elias shrugged, still bouncing the now dozing infant. "Mostly carbon, some caffeine, and apparently Baby kryptonite. And just like that, everything changed. The next morning, Elias awoke to find a pair of glowing red eyes staring at him through the mesh flap of his tent. He yelped, tripped over his own boots, and flailed half into his jacket before realizing it wasn't an assassin, a rogue AI, or Renshaw trying to borrow toothpaste again. It was Soraka, 7 feet tall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. With her stood the baby, wide awake, suspiciously quiet, and latched onto Elias's only clean towel like it was a sacred relic. "You forgot this," Soraka said. "Ah," Elias managed, still half draped in his sleeping robe. "Yes, thank you for returning my, ancient ceremonial textile." The baby sneezed. It sounded like a tiny sonic boom. Elias flinched. "She didn't cry all night," Soraka said slowly, as if confessing to a minor war crime. Elias blinked. "Wait, seriously? Not even during Phase 3 screaming hour?" "She hummed," Soraka muttered. "It was off-key." "That tracks." Camp had changed overnight. The soldiers still whispered, but now it wasn't out of fear. It was awe, mixed with confusion, and just a dash of competitive jealousy. Lieutenant Harrow had offered to file a formal commendation for Elias, which he respectfully declined by asking if it came with snacks. The medics tried to run scans on him. Nothing unusual. Slight iron deficiency. Elevated serotonin when near the infant. And somehow his heart rate slowed every time she yawned. By midday, Elias found himself dragged into what could only be described as an intercultural infant enrichment meeting. There were chairs, charts, even a holographic slideshow labeled Baby Protocol, Vayari Human Integration Opportunities, with way too many acronyms. "So," began Commander Trell with the expression of a man who'd rather be anywhere else, "Corporal Rowe, it seems you have bonded." Elias glanced at the baby sitting on the table in front of him, gnawing on his comm unit. "I mean, I've had houseplants less attached. Do you feel responsible for her?" He looked at Soraka, who stood beside him like a bouncer judging an Earth nightclub's dress code, then back at the baby, now trying to broadcast static across open comms. "Yeah," he said, "I guess I do." There was a long pause. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else sneezed into a vent and triggered an emergency lockdown protocol. Typical Tuesday. Eventually, Soraka spoke. "I've named her Yilu." "Yilu," Elias repeated. "Cool. Sounds like a type of spicy sauce. It means small thunder that shakes large sky. Still sounds spicy." He didn't expect her to chuckle, but she did, a low, dry sound like static learning to laugh. Later that night, while attempting to show Soraka how to microwave Earth Baby formula without igniting it, Elias found himself wondering what the hell was happening to him. He was a mid-tier grunt, third class. His biggest achievement before this was winning a bet on how many marshmallows you could fit into a helmet. 23. Now he was bottle-feeding an alien baby with the approval of a woman who could probably crush a tank with her thighs. "I was not supposed to be here," Soraka said quietly. He glanced at her. "Yeah, well, neither was I. But here we are, making space pudding and defying cultural expectations." Yilu burped, then launched a spoon halfway across the room. It embedded in the wall with a satisfying twang. Soraka tilted her head. "She has your aim," Elias grinned. "Now we're in trouble." When they finally got the baby to sleep, rocking her gently under the flickering camp lights, wrapped in a blanket that used to be his undershirt, Soraka didn't move away. Instead, she sat beside him, quiet, eyes on the stars beyond the tense mesh. "She dreams now," she said. "She didn't before?" "Number Vayari infants don't begin until their 6th cycle. But she started the night after you held her." Elias looked down at the bundle in his arms. "Huh? Maybe she's dreaming of snacks." Soraka didn't laugh this time, but she smiled, just a little. And somewhere outside, under twin moons and a sky full of curious stars, something shifted. Something small, but real. The Vayari diplomatic envoy arrived 2 days later in a ship shaped like a giant spiraled shell, dipped in chrome. It hovered awkwardly over the base for 3 hours, while everyone below debated whether to wave, salute, or shoot at it. Eventually it landed, sideways, and cracked a fuel line in the process, which immediately burst into a cloud of lemon-scented gas. They upgraded their coolant system, muttered Chief Engineer Drax, holding a fire extinguisher in a look of spiritual exhaustion. Smells like alien laundry day. From the shimmering gangway descended three officials in gleaming robes, each taller than Soraka, each carrying a data staff that projected their titles in 12 languages, none of which translated ambassador the same way twice. The humans squinted at the symbols. One called the lead envoy High Judge of Celestial Fluid Transfers, which made Elias snort into his rations. They came for one reason, the baby, or more specifically, Yilu. The moment they entered the tent where she slept, Soraka stood at full height and placed herself between them and the cradle, armor humming faintly. "She stays here," she said flatly. The tallest envoy looked unimpressed. "You disobey sacred orders. I interpret them." Elias, sitting nearby on an upside-down supply crate, raised a hand. "Not to interrupt the intergalactic family drama, but you guys know she's still teething, right? I don't think your robes are ready for that level of spit." They ignored him, of course. One of the envoys stepped forward. "The child's presence among humans jeopardizes balance. Her nature is not fully Vayari." That one word hung in the air like static. Elias stood, brushing crumbs off his pants. "So, what? You're saying she's not one of you because she doesn't scream in the same pitch?" "She is a hybrid." Soraka's eyes narrowed. Elias scratched the back of his neck. "Okay, look, I may not understand all your shiny titles or why your ship smells like floor cleaner, but I've seen that baby laugh in her sleep. I've watched her grab Soraka's finger like it was her whole world, and I've had her sneeze in my face and then giggle like she won a prize. Whatever mix she is, she's not dangerous. She's alive, and she's got people." The envoys conferred silently for a moment, their eyes flickering with bioluminescent thought patterns. Then the lead one stepped forward again. "You have formed a bond." "Yeah," Elias said, glancing at Soraka. "We're weird like that." The envoys weren't impressed. They demanded a formal review, a tribunal, which meant paperwork, meetings, translators, snackless briefings. Soraka took it with stoic dignity. Elias took it with coffee, lots of it. By the third day of arguments, he started bringing Yilu to the hearings. She'd babble through testimonies, throw soft toys at aggressive delegates, and once managed to activate a drone that followed the ambassador around making chicken noises. Elias swore it was an accident, mostly. "You are not taking her," Soraka said on the fourth day. "You are studying her. That is not the same as knowing her." "She is more than data," Elias added, holding up a drawing Yilu had done on his arm, using unauthorized permanent marker. "See this? That's apparently me. And that dot? That's a snack." Eventually, cracks appeared. One delegate admitted the child smiled at them. Another confessed that her giggle reminded him of old songs from Vayari homeworld nurseries. The tide began to shift, not through strategy, but through the awkward, unexpected weight of affection. That night, after the tribunal recessed, Soraka stood beside Elias as Yilu dozed in a hammock strung between two crates. The stars blinked overhead. "I never expected a human to fight for her," Soraka said. "I never expected to win an argument with a glowing squid diplomat," Elias replied. "But here we are." She looked at him, her eyes softer than he'd ever seen. "She dreams of you." He blinked. "Seriously? Like, in a good way?" "In her mind, you're always nearby. You are comfort." He stared at the sky a moment. "Weirdest comfort blanket ever." She smiled again, just slightly. And though the war wasn't over, the battle that mattered had already begun to shift. Not with weapons, not with data, but with lullabies, teething rings, and a stubborn human soldier who refused to let go. The plasma storm rolled in with no warning, unless you counted the meteorologist droid's error message that simply read, "Oops." Lightning danced across the dome's protective field, casting strobe-like flashes into the camp. Power blinked, then stuttered, then decided it had better things to do and shut down entirely. Screens went dark, lights flickered once like nervous eyelids, and then silence fell, interrupted only by distant thunder and one human voice saying, "Well, that's not ideal." Elias stood in the dark holding a bottle, a baby, and his breath. Yilu had just fallen asleep, a cosmic rarity, and now the world was shaking like a bag of angry marbles. I swear, he muttered to the air, if she wakes up now and screams loud enough to reboot the AI core again, I'm quitting and opening a soup stand on Mars. Beside him, Soraka was already moving. Her armor lit up dimly with internal energy sources, casting a faint glow. The storm will overload the shields. This section will collapse first. You say that so casually, Elias said, carefully adjusting Yilu's position so her tiny antennae didn't get smushed, as if collapsing rooms are just part of the ambiance. The floor beneath them trembled. Panels shifted. A vent cover popped off and clattered away like a startled insect. We must move. Right. Excellent plan. But, I can't see squat. Soraka reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Follow. Together they moved through the failing corridors, dodging sparks and the occasional half-functioning cleaning bot that had suddenly declared war on dust and logic. Yilu snored gently in Elias's arms, oblivious to the apocalypse. They reached the old engineering wing, a section no one used anymore except for Drax, and only when he wanted to be alone with his questionable music choices. The door hissed open reluctantly, like it had opinions about being disturbed. Inside, emergency lights glowed weakly. Rows of unused consoles blinked with half-finished diagnostics and corrupt logs. Elias gently placed Yilu into a storage crate he lined with his jacket and turned to ask why they were here. But Soraka was already pulling open a wall panel. What are you? Secret weapons? Hidden snacks? Records, she said. From the last war. The panel opened to reveal dusty storage drives marked in faded Viari symbols and human scrawl. One read, Project Harmony, eyes only. Oh, Elias said. That sounds conspiratorial. Soraka connected a data cable to the nearest terminal. The screen flickered to life, static for a second. Then a voice began to play, a human voice. Calm, tired. This is Dr. Myra Chen, lead on Project Harmony. If you're hearing this, I'm probably retired or vaporized. We tried to create unity biologically, cross-species compatibility. The child is proof it worked. Elias leaned closer. Wait, this is about Yilu? Soraka nodded, lips tight. They tried once before, to combine our DNA, to create a shared future. It was buried when peace failed. And now we're babysitting the result? She is more than result. She is a beginning. The storm outside howled louder, as if responding. A console nearby beeped, then fizzled into smoke. Yilu stirred in her crate, blinked up at them, and giggled. Elias sighed. She laughs in the face of catastrophic failure. I think she's ready for politics. Suddenly static filled the air. A hidden comm unit crackled to life. Unidentified life signatures detected. Broadcasting. Soraka shut it down with a slam of her palm. They know, she whispered. Elias didn't ask who. He already knew that when an old war ends with a cover-up, someone's always listening, and that someone usually has bigger guns. Yilu waved a tiny hand. We're not going to let anything happen to her, Elias said. Soraka looked at him, serious. You may not get to choose. I've got experience in not choosing wisely, he replied. I'm very consistent. She blinked, almost smiled. The lights flickered again. The storm moved on, but the quiet it left behind was no longer peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes before something wakes up. The next morning, everything smelled like burned circuits and baby wipes. Elias sat on a pile of cracked insulation foam, boots still damp from crawling through a coolant leak. Yilu in his lap and one of her socks mysteriously in his pocket. Around him, the camp moved in quiet repair mode. Engineers muttering, techs soldering, one poor medic chasing a runaway diagnostic drone that kept announcing it was emotionally compromised. Soraka stood a few meters away, speaking to someone through a holographic relay. Her voice was firm, sharper than usual, but without the heat it used to carry. She'd changed too. Less guarded now. Still terrifying in a fight, sure. But now she nodded at people. Once, she even helped carry a crate without being asked. Progress. Elias shifted as Yilu grabbed his nose with both hands and pulled, delighted. Ow! Okay, that's fine. I didn't need that nose to be symmetrical anyway. The tribunal had ended, not with dramatic speeches or space lasers, but with a shrug and an uncomfortable compromise. Yilu would remain with Siraka, and by extension, Elias, for the foreseeable future. A joint custody agreement between species, signed in triplicate, sealed with a genetic marker, and stamped by a bureaucrat who hadn't stopped sneezing since he saw the baby. She's allowed? Elias had asked when it was over. She is protected, Siraka corrected. Not quite the same, but it was enough. Now, their days were filled with routines, feeding, humming, learning that Vaori children required exposure to low-frequency vibrations to sleep, something Elias achieved by humming theme songs from Terrible Earth sitcoms and gently kicking the leg of a metal crate until it resonated. Yilu responded especially well to The Adventures of Space Carl, a show so bad it got banned on 3 planets. Elias had been offered a promotion. He declined. Then they offered him a research position. He declined that too. I'm already working full-time as a glorified dad jester, he said. Benefits include sleep deprivation and being sneezed on hourly. Sarika had watched him from across the room, arms folded, but her expression was unreadable in that infuriatingly elegant Vaori way. Later, she asked quietly, "Do you regret staying?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Number, I think I'd regret leaving." She didn't reply, but she sat beside him that night as Yilu curled between them, making content little clicking sounds. Then came the letter, or rather the encrypted packet with 27 seals, 5 warning beeps, and 1 accidental self-destruct protocol that Elias narrowly avoided triggering by spilling soup on it. Inside was a message from the Unity Assembly. "We want to meet her," it said, "the child who carries 2 legacies." Siraka read it twice. "We could say no," Elias offered. "I've got a fake mustache kit and a hover van we can borrow." "She will need to be seen eventually," Siraka said, "but not yet." "Good, because I haven't taught her how to shake hands without chewing fingers." The days passed. Camp repairs continued. Word of Yilu spread, not as a weapon or a risk, but as something softer, an idea, the kind you couldn't put back in a lab once it started laughing. One morning, Elias found Yilu standing, wobbling really, using a crate as support. She looked up, face lit with pride, and promptly fell on her butt. "She's walking," he said, awestruck. "She's falling," Siraka corrected, though she smiled. "She'll walk," Elias said. "Eventually." He picked Yilu up and held her against his chest. She smelled like warm synth milk and mystery. She pressed her forehead to his and sighed, a tiny sound full of trust. "I didn't plan any of this," he said. "No one does," Siraka replied. "The important things find us anyway." He looked at her. "You included?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I found her." "She found you." Yilu sneezed. "I guess that makes us a team," Elias said. Outside, the sun rose over the battered camp. A new rotation of recruits arrived, looking around in confusion as they passed a sign that now read, "Warning, baby zone. Proceed with snacks." Elias sat back against the crate, Yilu giggling in his arms, Siraka beside him with a quiet peace in her eyes. War had given them loss, but somehow from all the chaos they'd built something else. Not victory, not surrender, something better.